while on the subject when I made this. Here we have the Mult-Staff note stack, and we're going to be using this heavily. Now, the way that this is split up is everything. Okay, so we're going to be splitting this up in different ways. Alright, here's an entire treble clef. So TC is the treble clef. Know these, know positions. Yes. For the treble clef, now remember, we're not moving this stuff around anymore. This is exactly where it is. So if this is upper C, here's middle C, here's upper C. It's okay, that's it. C, G, A, B, C, D, E. And then this F would sit right up here on the top line. So that's all that's saying. That's definition. And we're going to be dealing with this kind of a chart here and breaking it up into different groups of notes so that we decide what are we going to look at when we look at a clef. So let's look at middle C. Let's look at the treble clef right here. We can start the clef from every good boy does fine. We can just look at the inner notes, F, A, C, E, and in case of the inner notes, we are looking at an F major 7th chord, all right? Or we can add from this E to this E here, we can add the lower note and say that defines the clef, and then we can define it with an E Phrygian scale. E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. Okay, we can do that. So there's about 5 different ways of defining it, and there's actually an infinite, not an infinite number, but there's many different ways to define it. So I painstakingly went through about 4 of them before I realized that there's a best way and a not best way to define the clef segments. Now, this lower treble right here, this is real. Yes, it is strictly, it is the lower treble, because if we look at it here and see what those notes are, we can see middle C right there in the lower treble clef. When we separate the two clefs, we have treble clef, upper treble, and lower treble, which are those notes that go down below a little bit the treble clef. We have middle C in there, so this is actually a mistake. All right, so that was actually a mistake. So this is the lower bass clef. Okay, so we're back. So this being the first chart of the 5 that I did on this subject matter, yes, there are mistakes because there's a lot of different things to keep track of, and I've been keeping track of the mistakes as I made the charts all along. I always change it. We'll leave that red as a red mark there, meaning that was a mistake. That wasn't the lower treble clef does not go that low. The lower treble clef, if anything, let's say at its biggest, would go right here, lower treble. Okay, we have middle C, and would go down to about at the lowest, I would think. But you know what? It can go down as low as it wants. That's why that could be lower treble. Because these notes, look at these notes. I mean, you could go down as low as you want on the lower treble clef. Although there's a limit, but I wouldn't be surprised, you know, if you could really go almost down that low, pretty far. But we want to draw the line somewhere. So we're just going to go down an equal clef amount. So we've divided the entire treble clef into upper treble, treble, and lower treble down here. Okay, we'll get to that. We got to get to another chart, and we'll show you. Me, myself, and I. So here we go. Here we go. Me, and you guys. You watching, the audience. My most important people, you help me understand this stuff, believe it or not. By explaining it to you, I review it and I understand it to myself, because it's like explaining it to myself too. I appreciate you watching and all you giving your time to watch these lessons, and I hope you're going to do great if you learn these techniques and put them to practice. So here we are, chart 514, multi-level quantized music staff. Same thing, just getting a little more into it. Here it is. Here's lower bass clef. In this scheme, we're defining it just one staff size lower than the bass clef right here. Here's the bass clef. So lower would be just appropriately about one staff size, but it actually goes lower than that. So let's look at these definitions. TC is treble clef. UT is upper treble clef. Those little notes that are above the treble clef. LT is lower treble clef. Those little notes that are below the lower treble clef. BC is bass clef. Upper bass is those little notes that are above the bass clef, and before three notes they're going on up into the treble clef, but they're listed with the bass clef so they can be played on the left hand in the piano, probably. So there's the overlap, and this is the overlap zone, as you all know, I'm sure. There's an overlap zone. Okay, so when we're defining, splitting up the, what we call like 6 segments here, treble, upper treble, lower treble, bass, upper bass, and lower bass, defined in 6 segments, trying to keep this, we're only going to adjust this variability down as low as we need to make it what? To make it into string shape scale fragments. So our string shapes, longs and shorts, all right? So we got the cage string shapes and the long modal string shapes. So we're going to adjust that in certain ways of splitting it up. And we're going to use this variability down here and up here, or we're not going to use that. We're going to just go with the 4, and we're going to go with major sevenths in one method. Here, right here is an F major 7. F-A-C-E, right there. And if we want to look at the treble clef as just a short treble clef, we're not going to play too much further up above, up here, you know, which is probably something like up here. Alright? We're not going to worry about these notes right now in this particular drawing. So this, we would just keep them small, and we're going to use the major seventh as our definer, or we could go with the modal scale. So let's see what the modal scales look like. But before we do that, I don't want to lose this diagram, because I didn't carry this diagram over to the other. So here's our to subsequent charts. I couldn't, there wasn't enough room, so I had to drop some things that we're supposed to talk about, learn, and then move on. It's not, you're not going to see this diagram, the staircase thing. Again, we have the treble clef here, mighty clef. This is it, but this is all contained within those 5 lines, 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, but it's 4 in-between line notes, F-A-C-E. That's the treble clef proper. That's the mighty clef, the small. The small. Let's agree on something, right? Sure, we could add a note on top, we could add a note on the bottom, we can go top to bottom. However big we have to make it to make this thing a fit into the cage system. So here, F, we don't have a string shape in the shorts that starts on F, so we have to use the longs there, and that creates a problem. So we'll see what that problem is. But before we do that, let's just look at this and look at some offsets here. Okay, so we've got The lower bass here, this is, and this note is shared. So this is going up from in a modal way now. Remember, this is the chart after the first one. Okay, this is chart 514, multi-staff notes and lines. See, I'm still not settling down on those modals, but I can tell right here, this is a modal scale. This is a G7 scale. Now we can talk about, we can nail it down. We don't say 5/7, we say G7. Okay, it's a G7 scale. Okay, like that. We're up to this G7 right here. Now, this isn't split up to be perfectly modal scales. So that's why the name of 514 isn't modal scales. It's multi-staff notes and lines. But you can see right here, this one's modal, and it's going from the top note, the first, where this F is down here, up to the top line there, and then it's sharing in the next. So in this scheme, we go right here, we have our G7, and we still call this bass clef A minor 7th because we're still looking at the 4 here. The upper bass becomes, those inner mighty notes are B half diminished 7th. Now we start with the lower treble. Remember, there's overlap. So now we're down here again, and it's E minor 7th in those, within those lines, the small. The treble clef itself is face FACE in this way of breaking it up. And again, the upper treble is another G7. They have the same. So we can look at that right here. If I could get me over here, we can look at the way that's broken up like that. We also have, we left out the D minor 7th and the C minor 7th in that particular way of doing it, because we're not going to cover that many, but we might be able to do that. It's just that because the bass clef and the treble clef overlap, it's not all one coherent clef. If it was, we would have D minor 7th and C major 7th just going from bottom to top. There's no top and bottom clef. The whole thing being one clef. That is 7 groups of 4 notes each. Then we'd have our full modal circle, but it's not divided up like that. So these guys are imaginary. And the D minor 7 would be up here above that, but it would start in the middle of the normal upper treble clef, like I said, because the way it's split up like that. That's just the way it is for purposes of what the purposes were when they made it. So this is our down here, our G7, the lower bass. And then next we have A, C, E, G, which is the bass clef. A minor 7th is circled right here. Let's do a little square there. So this is the bass clef right here. This is the lower bass. The upper bass becomes these guys. So there's overlap between the